Good afternoon. My name is Ulf Ehlers. This is my colleague Thomas Richter. We are from a research center, you can say, which is dealing with basically two things. One is international educational research, and the other one is technology-enhanced learning, and we try to bring that together. Thomas is the CEO for a consortium of German universities, which is cooperating with Korea. I myself, I'm doing lots of work also with African universities in East Africa and in West Africa, and Latin American universities a little bit. And so we are very interested actually in this global scope also. And we started an initiative just recently, 8 months ago, which actually is concerned with one question, and that is, what is happening when everything is available, open and free? And our hypothesis is that, just like you reported in the last speech, and you as well, that teachers, lecturers, professors, actors in higher education and also in adult education, vocational education training, professional training, they're not just starting to use what's there. There seems to be an issue associated with that, a barrier which is there, which is not visible because it's available open. You just need to go to Google to find resources, to use them, and we would like to know why. What is this issue actually? What is this barrier actually? And we assume that this barrier has to do with what we call trust. So people seem not to have a lot of trust in opening their resources to others or using these resources from others, or if they do that, talking about that and saying, we do that. We found in many countries of this world just what was now reported in the question-answer session after your brilliant talk. Thank you very much, by the way, for your talk. That it's really also an issue of, let's say, professionalism, which is going along with that. The teachers in universities sometimes say, well, what makes me a professor and them the student is that I have the knowledge and they don't. And so if I would give that away, what's that doing to my position? And we would like to work in this field. We started this initiative called the Open Educational Quality Initiative, because we believe trust, and as a derivative from that, quality is actually the issue to make things work. So that's what our attempt is about, and it's just in a way summarized into these two sentences. The current focus on OER initiative is mainly on building more access to digital content, and we believe that too little consideration is given to how this will support educational practice, how this will support better educational practices also, because why should we do OER if we just do the same stuff that we also do without OER? What does it mean to an educational scenario if OER is coming into a picture? Is it an opening also not only of the resource but of the pedagogies, of the learning contexts, of the objectives, like we always discuss in our lifelong learning agendas? Everybody in every situation should have learning available for their own objectives and paths they want to follow. So is it opening the full scale, or are we focusing really on resources? So we believe we should widen the scope. We believe we should focus on practices, promote quality, and we should always attempt to innovate education when we do the change or the switch over, the shift to open. So open educational practices is really something we are looking at. We believe it's something different than open educational resources. The practices are more concerned with the methods, the policies, the usage, so to speak. And we believe that we have to work not with teachers, but what we call the open educational practice governance community. So the management of a university, the teachers, the learners, they are all involved, and also, of course, the policy environment. So in order to build an open environment in which open educational resources are used to improve the quality of learning, we need to, in a way, ask everybody to make this effort and support this effort. And we would like to map this out. We are not very far yet, I must say. We started with, it's available on the internet, with collecting over 60 case studies where we found open educational practices in institutions well, it has a European focus, I must admit, but also an international extension to it, so to speak. It can be viewed here, and we are analyzing them now to find what is common to all of them. These are all cases where open educational practices are to some extent existing and working somehow. And we're doing this work for mainly higher education and adult education, but in the frame of this research initiative, and that's what we would like to talk today about, we also did a piece of research in which we wanted to know how are the things in schools. So, and now I hand over to my colleague.
Yeah, hello. Thank you for the introduction. We did an exploratory study to find out the successes and failures of German teachers in schools by using OER. And our research questions in this exploratory study have been how do teachers in Germany use OER? Do they use OER? What are the motivators and their barriers? And what can we do as institutions who produce OER to support them? The research scenario was we had 4 groups of teachers from different types of schools in Germany. So every school type was represented by teachers from one single school. And we sat together in an informal scenario. It was quite a comfortable scenario at private homes or inside of restaurants, and did nothing else than having a group discussion to a pre-selected topic. The discussions took between 1.5 and 3 hours. Sorry. So the whole thing was moderated, and we had something like a moderated question to different subjects, topics. General to OER, what in your view are open educational resources, but also more concrete, what is the scenario in your school, but also more concrete related to open educational resources. Are there, did you already use OER? What have been your experiences? Where have you identified problems? Where do you search for open educational resources, and how do you search for open educational resources? And since we are investigating in the field of open educational practices, we also have been interested in the question, how do you adapt, or do you adapt open educational resources? When those are taken from different contexts, they may not fit into the school system. We asked for management of OER and the policy, so what do the school administrations and the government do to support the use of OER? Are there related policies maybe? And related to the production of OER, we basically have been interested if they produce OER. So the outcomes have been quite interesting. So the scenario to do the explorative study was quite new for us. Usually we do something like interviews with experts. This is a face-to-face situation where one person talks with another person. In this case, the situation was a little bit different. The interviewee, so in this case it was me, simply sat there and said, let's talk about open educational resources. And I put some questions into the room, and the people who had to be interviewed, the teachers, they simply discussed with each other, and I did nothing else than moderating and writing what happens. So, sorry. To the question, it was so dry, I'm sorry. Have you ever used OER contents? Yes, all but one teacher of the question teachers have used OER. In which context do they use them? Particularly for explaining additional topics, so topics additional to the basic education, because most of the basic education in German schools is predefined by curricula, and also the books they have to use are predefined. So the books, the schools have something like private libraries, and from there they take the books and give it to the students, and they have used those books since generations, and they will use those books in the next 20 generations, I guess. But in cases of recent things, like for example the Iraq War, 9/11, or the tsunami, they are encouraged to talk with the children about these things. And in those cases, open educational resources are considered being extremely valuable for the teachers. In most cases, they primarily use pictures from the internet, so they don't use courses because of the reasons I've already told. And they use those pictures or movies for illustration of the content they already have to present. So, for example, if it is a course of arts, and there is a really little picture of Mona Lisa, for example, they can go to the internet and take a big picture and then present it in the room, so that the pupils can see the picture in a form that they can discuss what they see, and not look at the little thing. For the teachers, basically the difference between open and publicly accessible educational resources is unclear. So they have been of the opinion that if I can access this in the internet, it is free for me, so I can use it. So this idea of the licensing, what has been talked in this conference a lot, finally, is not really a topic for the teachers. The teachers look into the internet, they see something they can use, and finally they use it. And they also, when they produce open educational resources, they do it in the same way. They say, I put it into the internet, and everyone who needs it shall take it. Why should I use a license, or why should I think about which kind of license, and there are a lot of those licenses, is now suitable for my situation? So from the legal point of view, this may be a problem somehow, and we have to educate the teachers, finding out what is legal and what is not legal, what means a licensed open educational resource, and what is more or less private or closed educational resources, but which is open accessible. Or maybe we don't need, as we have heard today in some of the presentations, that maybe we should think about to change the complete concept of this licensing and say everything is open as soon as it is accessible. And if we don't want it to be open, then we have to say, I don't want this to be open, or best of all, hide it. Put it into a closed environment. So we asked, how do you search and decide for certain OER? It was in German schools. In German schools, the lessons mainly are in German, a part of English and French lessons where they are in English and French. So they first of all searched in basic German repositories. We have two initiatives related to that. This is Schulen ans Netz and Lehrer Online, who provide such initiatives and which are quite visual for the teachers. If they don't think anything there, they do a Google search, but they are limited to the English language as far as they are able to speak English. So for some older teachers, it is quite challenging to search for English language material. The teachers often worry if the information they find in the internet is correct or if it is adequate for their scenario. They are teaching children and not adults, like at the university, for example, so the children maybe can get a damage from the way how information is provided. And in some cases, the teachers are not really sure if they should use the information or the material they find or not. Also, they often don't know if the information is correct or if it maybe is a fake. How can they decide that? And for building the trust, this was one of the basic things we found out also here. We have the trust problem, which we also identified within the OPAL project in higher education and adult education. How can we build trust? They say they need something like a quality seal for schools, maybe something like metadata, which describe this resource is designed for this or that context, and if you want to use it in another context, maybe you have to change this or that. This is another big problem, the adaptation process. So how do the teachers finally interact with resources? How can they adapt resources to their own scenario? They cannot. They are not able to adapt open educational resources. They only can take what they get. One big issue in this relationship, for example, are pictures, where text is included, and the text is in a foreign language when they want to teach this in the German language, and the picture is not changeable in a not changeable format like JPEG or any old TIFF or anything else. Then they have a picture with an English text, but where they would like to put a German text inside, they cannot. So the picture, as great it may be, is absolutely worthless for the teachers. To the management, the use and adaptation is more or less already done. To the management of OER, support policies, we don't have policies, but there's no money available. So finally, the OER are needed, but the use is not recognized. So when they use OER, when they put a lot of time into the OER to make them presentable in their classrooms, no one is interested if they put this effort into their work or not. They do it or they don't do it. They can teach like they have taught 25 years ago or 80 years ago. Finally, no one cares as long no one claims that this has to be changed. One information I forgot before, in rarest cases in our schools we have computer classes, so using open educational resources in a German school in most cases leads to a print version of the open educational resource. So they take out the resource from the internet and print it 20 or 30 times depending on the size of the classroom and distribute it in the classroom. Or they have something like a projector like we have here, but this is rare that they do. They have one or two in the school, but not in every classroom, and then they can use their own computer. So, conclusions. Using expert group discussions for explorative study led to fruitful results. We didn't know this before. We didn't find any who did something like that before. First of all, the experts learned from each other and felt free also to talk about challenges. This is a situation so my basic research topic or research field is empirical educational research, and I experience often when I do interviews, they don't talk about mistakes, they just talk about successes. And in this situation, this was quite different because the teachers talked with each others and helped each others with advices how to do something better, for example, and so on. And in this environment, they also talked about their problems quite freely. I didn't have to ask for this, this happened simply. So this is a quite fruitful situation or quite fruitful scenario for such kind of research, for such kind of explorative research. And topics have been raised within the discussion that else might maybe not have been discussed, because I didn't think about it. For the OER movement, OER is welcome in the schools, and it is really needed in the context of German schools. The teachers use and produce OER and would like to contribute more. They need technical support, particularly also for providing OER, because they have their school servers, but the school servers are not public, and so they almost have no chance to publish their stuff. And where they can publish, it is for most teachers, particularly the old ones, too complicated to fulfill the requirements to finally get the stuff on a server. So there they need a lot of work, a lot of help. Then they need a mechanism that helps building trust and ensure correctness of information. There's a need for assistance within the adaptation process. And finally, what a lot of research, the direction where a lot of research related, a lot of research and projects related to OER is going into that direction, the availability and accessibility of OER is no problem. It is available, it is accessible, but the question is, what can I do with it? How can I do with it? And how can I use it? Regarding the legal background, we have to find out if we have to change something. So if we insist on licensing, and if we do so, We should find a way to educate teachers in schools, at least in Germany. Maybe in other schools the teachers already know everything about this kind of licenses. What's the difference between accessible and open? Regarding the practical use, if we as producers of OER provide pictures or presentation slides, it would be great not using PDF or any unchangeable format, but using changeable formats like, for example, PowerPoint. That's all. Any questions? Thank you. Do you want to answer?
I think we didn't ask that in the group discussions, but I think that unfortunately the question you imply is how to get teachers to do that. I have no answer to that. What I see is that most of the, let's say, the intentions to change that start along with the discussion of what we usually call the knowledge or the information society. You know, we are working in the field of economics and more specifically information systems and economics. When our students leave the university, after 6 or 8 months, if they don't learn for their own, they will not be able to work in the companies any longer, which they are starting. In the software business, that's a cycle of 6 months. If you don't train yourself as an employee to learn the programming language, to learn the frameworks and so on and so on, you just have to stop. So being aware of this from the policy side, being aware of this on the university management side, also to say we are producing citizens, employees who are in a way able to self-develop in that way, is a very, very important agenda in policy, in university management, with the whole privatization now of universities, where students more and more choose which university do I go to. Also, it's a movement where students choose to go to universities which are likely to produce not only the knowledge or to transfer the knowledge into their heads, but also produce experience-based learning, where they make an intercultural experience, where they learn how to present, discuss, develop, innovate, and so on. So I think this is really an issue which comes, what you could say, from a little bit in a top-down manner to the educational institutions. On the other hand, it is then necessary to embed or to, let's say, frame this top-down need or to feed it with grassroots initiatives. We earlier here in the session before, we had a lot of discussions about research-based learning, what we are doing in our institute a lot, for example, to involve students, to not present them with knowledge they have to learn, but to involve them into the art of asking questions and finding out the answers themselves, so to speak. But yeah, it's a cultural question. Culture means you have to deal with everyday practices in an organization. You have to deal with values. You have to deal with the models the actors within an organization are having. So it's a total system approach which is necessary from the top down and bottom up. It's not really a good practical answer, I'm admitting, but in OPAL, in this Open Education Equality Initiative, we are trying actually to formulate guidelines to help institutional leaders develop a frame of operation in their institutions which is stimulating activities like that and behavior like that. But we are not ready yet.
Can you talk for 2 seconds about Schule am Netz, K through 12, the willingness of teachers? I mean, obviously Germany works differently in terms of the core curriculum alignment being federally mandated. Can you talk for 2 seconds about the willingness to share math teacher in Berlin sharing with a math teacher in Stuttgart and Munich, and does that work? Is there best practice exchanges and things like that happening?
From my point of view, this is absolutely no problem. I personally, I studied journalism because before I came to this, to the University of Duisburg-Essen, and I wrote for Lehrer Online, which is the other initiative directly related to teachers, and I made a lot of educational presentations for teachers. And the teachers have been very, very interested. This was in the beginning when internet came to the, this initiative, or I should start one step before. This both initiatives have been founded by the government as the assistance to as the official assistance to the schools, so as a tool for assistance, so that they can use computers and internet. And it went on developing by the time, but most of the work which has been done there has been done by the teachers. So the staff of Schulen ans Netz and Lehrer Online is a very small staff, and most of the people working there indeed are teachers doing the work without voluntary work finally, so without getting any money, but because they want to share, and all those let's say events organized by Schulen ans Netz were full of teachers. So the they have been full, they have been overbooked in some cases, so the teachers sat outside and wanted to participate in this. The reason for this is quite easy, because in Germany we didn't have administrative or technical staff when the computers came to the schools. What the schools did, they said, okay, the government says we need to have computers and we need to educate our pupils in computers. This is the one part. But on the other hand, the government doesn't give us more money to do this, but only to buy the computers. Now someone has to build up the infrastructure, and who had to do this was a teacher. And so the teachers helped each other. Now to a more meta level, to different subjects, the teachers learned during this process of implementing the infrastructure and organizing the networks and the networking itself, they learned that it's very fruitful to cooperate. And I guess because of this now, and using internet, what wasn't possible before, now they really cooperate also between the schools. So the one teacher knows teachers from various other schools, they meet each other, they talk about their education, and of course they also tell each other how they solve problems. So if understand, for example, in mathematics, if the students always stumble over one certain aspect, the one teacher maybe has a solution, how he explained this, and they exchange this information and this knowledge.
Is there a formalized community there by practice to exchange that?
Yes, this is in Lehrer Online. This is the second portal. They have something like a discussion forum where the teachers directly can online discuss with each other such topics, and they use it and they do it, yeah.
And there are also national and federal, they call it education servers. That's portals for materials, for school. Yeah.
Any other question?
Questions? From